Hello and welcome to VOD of Consciousness with Sientir. That's me, and I'm going to be journeying through the mountains. So last time I spent a shocking long period of time setting up my party build, but that's something that I really love doing with this game, is setting up those party builds. So let's just go ahead and start killing some blessed griffins. Oh yeah, I got Spellbreaker. Getting Spellbreaker is really useful because Spellbreaker prevents them from being able to be casted on, which damages our damaging capability. Fortunately, I can still knock them down by telling them they move like a dwarf, which is kind of racist, but whatever. Actually, that segues into sort of the topic that I did want to talk about while I journey through the mountains. So, I've been doing a lot of thinking about representation stuff, and like racism is kind of the big one. And then there's a bunch of like things called phobias, which I don't necessarily fully like that phrase because I feel like it's what's the right term? A confused language. Phobia is an irrational fear of something, and I feel like one of my complaints about a lot of stuff talking about bigotry related stuff is that there's a bunch of older terms, like misogyny or sexism, those sorts of things that make a lot of sense to me, where they come from, how they come about, that sort of thing. But there's a bunch of newer terms, like Islamophobia and homophobia, that use this phobia language that feels very odd to me. And I kind of... It's a different type of thing, and I feel like it's trying to make stuff, like, I don't think they want to be put in the same bucket as, like, arachnophobia or agoraphobia, right? Arachnophobia, the irrational fear of spiders. Of course I had my mini-map up already. And I think agoraphobia is fear of open spaces, but don't quote me on that. And so it's, like, it's weird to kind of bundle them up in the same way. I also get frustrated, like this is tangentially related, but with talking about immigration and xenophobia versus like other concerns with immigration that usually are derived from, to some extent, economic conditions. Like when people's economic conditions are more challenged, they tend to not want other people coming into the job environment. I kind of want to change my character's look. 1 second here. Sure, let's just go with this. And so, anyway, like I was saying, I've been thinking about some of this representation type stuff, and I guess, for the lack of a better word, it's just very confusing to me, and so I have lots of questions, like, in kind of a meta sense of like how much are concerns about like racism on a systemic level, like a complicated network of social interactions. We should stop attacking that guy because he has a enchantment on him that makes damage heal him and not going down. I think there could have been something that I might have been able to bring as a dervish. Let's get out of the symbol of wrath. So what I mean by sort of mixed social, or a complicated network of social interactions, is, for example, how much do people expect? I mean, just use the classic one, right? White versus black is kind of the racial, whatever you want to call it, fight du jour. How much of that is... Oh, we're going to get wormed, aren't we? How much of that is driven by, like, social conditioning and, like... So what I'm saying is, like, when people talk about, for example, systemic racism, usually what I think of with that is where the systems are set up to perpetuate racist ideals. So in these sorts of situations, what you have is, for whatever reason, some group has decided another group should be disadvantaged. For example, affirmative action is actually a tends to be a form of racism in the sense of it's giving preferential treatment to one race over another. Now, it's usually framed positively because it's seen that it's balancing out in inequality, or helping to kind of balance out in inequality. I should... Which is... let's go Grunt's footprint, I think, over this way. Sorry, I'm trying to remember my geography. It's been a while since I've been in here. I could bring Don't Trip, and that would counter some of this. But I don't think it matters that much. So, like, for example, when something negative happens to someone, how much do they use race as an excuse? And say, oh, racism is the reason why a bad thing happens to me instead of other circumstances. You see what I'm saying at all with that? Like, it's something that I wonder about. Because I worry that people are allowing their race to be an impediment to them when it shouldn't be. Like, in other words, if something is... And this is where I don't know, right? So I'm walking in speculation and just trying to understand complicated situations or what could potentially be going on with complicated situations, etc. I need to go up towards those mountain trolls. And... where... So, I wonder about things like... If things are equal and somebody has been taught that they're not, do they think that, therefore, that bad things that happen to them are due to racism and good things that happen to others are due to basically racism, right? Like, how much do you evaluate what's happened in that sort of framework versus in some other framework? Is this... Yeah, I think I need to go that way. More Ezra shadows popping up. And so, like, this is something where I don't know. Like, if the assumption is automatically, oh, that happened because racism, is that accurate? Like, how often is that actually accurate? Versus, like, well, maybe it was because you assumed that something, like, that you were being watched, so you acted according to that, and then that made you look suspicious, and so the person responded. And again, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of social cues that are giant question marks for me in this sort of stuff. Which one of these is which? Okay, that's use a spell, gets healed, and that's gets healed. We should actually try to take down these Dolyak Masters. In retrospect, you move like a dwarf isn't very good because it doesn't knock down these Dolyaks because they're in the class of enemies too large to get knocked down. Okay, I should stop attacking that guy because he's... prevented damage. And, like, there's other stuff that I wonder about, too, of, like, how much is there not racism in the system, but in individuals within the system? And is, like, that a difference? Is that significant? Is that something... Like, how do you take care of that? I guess, for lack of a better phrase. Oh, looks like there's two guys here. I should attack where there are multiple enemies, because I'm using a scythe, and that hits multiple enemies. Yep, they just went down together. So I guess that's kind of what my question is on a lot of it. And, like, I think representation, for example, is super important. Or, let me rephrase it. I think good representation is super important. Because I think it can inspire people. I think it can help set the framework that we use for trying to evaluate individuals, which I think is really important as well. So, for example, what you think somebody can be is dependent upon how you've seen them portrayed. But again, like, we place a lot of emphasis on how people look, but that's just because of how our brains work. We're going to. And so, like, the way that people are socialized, they're brought up, they're taught about how the world works, that sort of thing, has a huge impact then on how they perceive stuff. So, for example, In full disclosure, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but you know, I kind of assumed people knew. I'm what's classified as white. I don't particularly like that classification because I feel that it is very broad and kind of reductive in a way, because it's lumping a lot of different ethnicities together. Like this is part of what it is, right? Is I wonder how much is it race versus other cultural signifiers to indicate that you belong to my group. Like I think there's a mixture of stuff going on with some of that, but I definitely wonder about some of these concepts. Like if somebody looks and acts according to a certain culture that's different from mine, I tend to have opinions on that culture that have been formed by how it's been represented in media. And so there's certain cultural identifying... wow, that's an awful lot of trolls. Okay, now I'm confused about... Oh, maybe I'm thinking of somewhere that connects more up... Oh, it's up here. Yeah. There's a stop that I want to make in the Deldrimor War Camp, and I was trying to remember where it is. So from my own end, it tends to be like, because I try to observe like what's going on in my own mind with regards to how I would be inclined to prejudge someone. And again, those should go away when you actually have data to work with. I don't think... I think we cannot escape having prejudging going on, because that's what happens, right? We don't have anything to work with, so we will judge based upon what we have to work with, and then hopefully we can replace those with judgments based on actual information once we get actual information. That's how things should work, and when they don't work that way, we run into all sorts of horrible problems. And when we base systems upon the prejudice instead of actual data, we also run into problems, because our prejudices tend to be not entirely based in reality. They're based on what's like been formed for us during formative years and how much we've worked to overwrite them. It's, to some extent, it can be hard to overwrite entirely, but with intentional effort, I think you can eventually kind of mostly replace baseline assumptions that we use to form prejudices. But don't ship might have been a better idea here than I consider. Actually, so in Prophecy, which is the campaign that we're playing now, bosses are more resilient. In other campaigns, they deal more damage, more than, like, they have a little bit more resiliency, but not as much as they do in Prophecies. So it's actually better to kind of save bosses for last in Prophecies, but in other campaigns, it's better to blitz the bosses down. That's just some design differences that I find to be a little bit interesting. It's difficult not to interrupt myself. I'm finding on my topic du jour as I am wandering through the area. Let's take down some more trolls, shall we? I don't know. It's one of those things where what I want is for everyone to treat each other as human beings. The problem that I see in a lot of these for culture wars is a lack of doing that. Where a bigot is treated as subhuman and isn't given human dignity, nor is the person making the accusation of bigotry. And it's frustrating to me because I think that both sides can have some amount of point, like depending upon how much of a bigot someone is. Because what can be very confusing is what results in an accusation of bigotry, I guess, can be confusing as to why, or can be presumptive. And I want people to feel like they have space to work through ideas and to ask about experiences and to learn from experiences. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who just want to be jerks. And there's a lot of assumption of correctness, what we would call self-righteousness, I suppose, which I think is super unhelpful to a lot of these culture wars, cultural debates, because, and my reasoning for saying that is because I feel like the self-righteousness denies the humanity of one's opponents and removes the ability to mutually learn from each other. These Tundra Giants are super obnoxious, and I really should replace You Move Like a Dwarf with Don't Trip. I think it would provide some slight relief. Do I have... it's probably under command. Let's see. Yeah. Huh. That's... no, that's knocked down. Target other ally would be knocked down. All nearby foes take 19%. That doesn't help. I can put that on myself. That's not... Excuse me. That might actually not be bad to give to General Morgan. I need to think about how I want to set up my party here. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here before I head into the next zone. And hopefully we can have kind of a topic of discussion, because what I want is like to mutual respect and mutual learning. So, until next time, everyone, take care. And I suppose I should remind you that I have a Patreon at patreon.com/Sientir. It is my guild message. Hooray! Bye-bye.